Thank you very much for attending. My name is Tin Man Lee, and the title of today's talk is Wildlife Photo Editing Masterclass, a brand new workflow which allowed me to win awards and evoke emotion. Some of you may have seen the photo on the left, and this is a fox photo that has won the wildlife category of Nature's Best Photography William Smith Prize International. From November 2018 to September 2019, this photo will be in display in the Museum of Natural History. So that's the exhibit. We're going to talk about three secrets today. So first is why being the best in image sharpening, noise removal, and color adjustment is the worst way to photo editing. Second is the one thing professional photographers never told you, but is the most critical mistake on editing. How you can use a reverse process to evoke viewers' emotion through psychology. Number three is you don't need to be an expert in Photoshop. In fact, you don't need to have any technical background to master photo editing. These days, I only need 4 minutes to edit a photo from the original raw file, beginning to the end, when I submit to photo contests, share on internet, or even send it to printing company to print photos 32-inch or even larger. I'm going to show you next. In one of the trips, I met my good friend Carl. He was a physicist, and he was very focused on becoming the best. So he actually attended many more workshops than me. He learned from the world's master in photography, and he would have a notebook with all the photo editing techniques that he collected from them, and he would circle around them and highlight them and stuff. And I was the lucky guy because he would share with me and say, hey, Tin Man, what do you think of that? What do you think of this? And then we would talk and discuss. So those are some of the best techniques in sharpening and noise removal and color and all this. So at that time, I bought all kinds of photo editing that you can buy from the market. They are all good, by the way. And the techniques they taught about how to sharpen the photo, how to remove the noise, they are all top-notch, no question about that. And then they would go into details about how do you create a mask, how do you create a layer and stuff like that. And I study, and I learned. Carl was really the first one to teach me that, hey, you shouldn't just look at wildlife, because he went to landscape photography, portrait, macro, all kind of stuff. And that's when I was really inspired to learn from people in portrait, in landscape. And since I have always been interested in psychology stuff, I also study about what triggers the psychology of people, right? So I read all kinds of books about how to tell a story. And then, almost like a magic, I was driving in Yellowstone by myself one time. I just had an epiphany, and I came up with a new workflow. So I posted my photos, and the photos were being shared by everybody, really. And my photos would get tens of thousands of likes. And I look at for example, this bison and bird has 600 comments. It was just mind blowing. I didn't know what happened. And then I was selected as the 10 wildlife photographers you need to follow in 2018, make magazine covers, being featured and stuff like that. And this one is very interesting in that NANPA has an Instagram account, and each year they pick 9 most popular photos that were being shared by their Instagram accounts. 6 of the 9 photos were taken by me, and I didn't black out the other photos not to give them credit because it's the copyright, so I had to block them. It seems to me that something was happening and I was doing something right. All these things were just from one editing workflow. And today I'm going to talk about that to you. Some statistics before we dive into that. So right now, there are 2.32 billion people using Facebook, right? And that means that every day your news feed was filled with everybody's photos and what they were doing and stuff like that. And even Instagram has 1 billion users now. I just want to ask you a question. In this morning, when you were reading your news feed in Facebook and Instagram, and when you see a photo, how much time do you really spend to look at each of those photos before your thumb just moves and go up into the next photo? I bet that it would be less than 1 second, right? If you just switch back the perspective, and when you post a photo, and then it shows up in other people's news feed. And sometimes you wonder, how come they didn't comment on my photo was so good and stuff. On the other hand, if you want to submit to Nature's Best Photography, last year they have over 25,000 entries. And they only have about, 4 or 5 judges. That means that each judge have to go through all these photos and then make a selection very quickly. Nobody would want to spend an hour to look at your photo and say, this photo didn't get my attention, but maybe there's something that I really need to know, and then they would spend time on that. No, they wouldn't. They would just look at a page with thumbnails, and then they would just throw away all these that are not interesting and then go on to the next. So what I mean by this statistics is that the game has changed. So this is really what's happening. That has not happened just 5 years ago or 10 years ago. What has changed is that you can't use the same photo editing techniques from years ago and just assume that is good enough. And the easiest and the most powerful way to make a difference in your photo so that it can win awards, get publication, and move people is really to just change your digital workflow completely. I have friends who told me that I never shoot RAW, JPEG looks fine. But in reality, a RAW file might have 12 bits and a JPEG has 8 bits. And these are numbers that you might not understand. But if I can tell you that a 12-bit file has 4,000 levels of luminance. For example, if for a red color of red, there are 4,000 different shades. You all know 50 Shades of Grey, right? So if you take a RAW file, it has 4,000 shades of different brightness, right? Luminance is very similar to brightness, but it's a little bit different. So you pay thousands of dollars for a camera, and you told me that you only take JPEG because it looks fine enough to me, and you're throwing away thousands of shades of colors, which you can have been applied in your photo editing to bring out these potentials to help move people, right? So I mean, it's just beyond me. There are books about maybe landscapes and people, and a lot of the wildlife photography professionals, they learn from those people, right? So people really never know the correct amount of sharpening. For example, if you are posting a photo of 1900 pixels versus a 1200 pixels versus a 32-inch print, right? How do you optimize the amount? They all have no clue. And how much noise removal is optimal, right? And all these things. And what the heck is layer, right? It's just way above everybody's head. And it's tough, right? Some people will say that I hate Photoshop. I don't want my photos to look Photoshopped. I want to be truthful, right? And some people will say that it takes forever to edit a photo. And indeed, I used to spend almost 40 minutes or more to edit a photo by following what the professional were teaching me. And truth be told, how many of you think that photo editing is ultra boring, right? So why being the best in image sharpening, noise removal, and color adjustment is the worst way for photo editing? I mean, being good at Photoshop really does not equal to good photography. And just think about it. What's the worst comment that you can get for your photo? Wow, you are so good at Photoshop. Some people would just slide the saturation of in Photoshop or Lightroom all the way to the right and then think that this is what professional looks like. And this is very unfortunate in a way. And people will say, oh, the color is insane. Is it Photoshopped? So if you're using Photoshop and Lightroom now, and if you're not getting the results that you want, it actually probably has nothing to do with your Photoshop skill. And really, it has nothing to do with your sharpness, color accuracy, details, noise control, and how difficult your shot is. Some people come back and say, this is a once-a-lifetime shot, and nobody cares. Why? And so you really have to sit back a little bit and think about what I said, because it sounds crazy, right? Because at the end of the day, it is not how sharp and how accurate the color is and how clean your photo looks, or even what crazy action you captured. It's all in how you make the viewers feel, okay? So this is very important that you have to remember. So my question is what is the comment you want to hear of your photo? And for example, what I wanted to hear is, you capture the soul of the animal. I'm deeply moved. It's like your photo has magic that sucked me in. These are some of the things that I really want to hear. And I don't know about you, how to create this kind of magic. And the answer is we have to lead their eyes using subtle cues, and I'll explain this. So again, it's not about the best parameters for sharpening and blah, 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 all these kind of things. It's how each editing step help lead the eye of the viewer to where you want them to see. You need a very clear objective, a hook. So for example, if I ask you, if I take a photo like this, what I want the viewers to see, right, is the eyes of this cup, right? There's just one thing. And for this one, what do I want the viewers to see? Nothing, because this is a crappy photo. There's no hook in the photo. People didn't know if they want to look at the water or the one on above. So this photo doesn't have a hook. And when people see something like that, they will just scroll to the next photo, right? And so you have to have a very strong idea of what you want people to look at, right? For example, this, you want people to look at the touching of the bill of the baby with the mother penguin, right? And this one, you want people to look at the eyes. This one, you want people to look at the leaves and the eyes, right? This one, you want people to look at the claws, the sitting pose and the eyes, right? And this one, you want people to look at this claw, almost look like human walking, right? So look back into your photo and just tell me this one thing you want people to look at. And then ask yourself, has your editing, any of your editing steps helped you to lead the eyes of the viewers to look at that? And if you don't, then your editing workflow has a big problem. So that leads to the second secret that I have, which is the one thing that professional photographers never told you, but is most critical on editing, which is how do you use a reverse process to evoke people's emotions. So now we're getting something crazy, right? We are not talking about, is it 500%, 1.2 radius to do the sharpening, right? Because there is some importance in it, but it's not the most important. And we have to go back to the most famous painting of all time in order to understand that idea. So everybody agree that Mona Lisa is the most important painting. And why people after hundreds of years, they were still talking about it, right? It's because people will say that, oh, it's like she's looking at me wherever I stand. Is she smiling or is she not smiling? It seems to have some magic, right? Once I look at the photo, her eyes just suck me in. I can't stop looking at her eyes, right? So these are the typical feeling that people get on that. And then some people say that, oh my God, this is just some hype. It's just because it's Da Vinci, everybody are thinking about it and all. But no, not really. Let's play a game, okay? Let's take a look at this image right here. And how many of you, when you look at this photo, can see an inverted triangle? Most of you can see that. And yeah, some of you raised the hands, I see that. Good job, right? But then the reality is that there is no inverted triangle that was being drawn there. So which black straight line is longer, right? And the answer is that they have the same length, right? But because of the surrounding of it, it makes it look like that the right-hand side is longer than the left-hand side. And this one, that all these zigzag line, they are not in parallel. Right? And then some of the green looks deeper than the other greens and all these things, right? So that's really, and in reality, there's only one green color and one red color and one white color in this photo. But it messes up all our visual cortex, really, because of all the surroundings and stuff like that. And the reason I want to play with you on these games is for you to accept that our human visual system is not perfect. We got affected by it. And if you still use the same techniques of sharpening, blah, 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 in the same photo, you're not really harnessing the most powerful thing in our mind, which is the imagination and the trick that we can play with the visual cortex. Let's play the final game here. So in this diagram, look at the square with an A on it and look at the square with a B on it, right? Which square is brighter, right? So you say that, I'll just let you take a look, right? Is A brighter or B brighter, right? Most of you might say that B is brighter, right? And some of you may say that A is brighter unless you have superhuman power, right? But in reality, they have the same color. When you draw a line with the same color on it to connect the two, that is actually the same color. But from here, you definitely can say that it is different colors, right? Why? Because of the shadow created by this cylinder thing. You just mess up your mind and you feel that everything is brighter on B, but not on A, right? So what does this big discovery means to art and also to editing, right? So now is really the key point that I want you to focus on. And the key point is that human vision on brightness is relative, not absolute. And take a look back into Da Vinci's photo right here. You look at her hands first and then look at her face, right? It's all very silky smooth, right? Very human-like, right? Amazing, Da Vinci's techniques, right? But if you look at the luminosity of these two parts, right? First glance, it almost look like the same, right? But when you compare side by side, there's a huge difference in the luminosity of that. And Da Vinci didn't do it by accident. He did it intentionally because he knew that in our visual cortex, we tend to look at the things from the darker part to the brighter part. And so there is this invisible force that drives our eyes from the darker part of the skin to the brighter part, and we didn't even know it. And this is what I call the subtle tension. It's something that you almost cannot see if you look at it at first, but actually with this really subtle change of the pixel brightness, our subconscious will just drive our eyes to look at the bright part. And that's when people will say that, oh my God, there's magic. I don't know why. I just kept looking at her. Your photo has to have some subtle conflict, tension, and drama to lead their eyes. And you may still have no clue what I'm talking about here. And so I just show you that Da Vinci has mastered this subtle use of the brightness tension, right? So when it's so subtle, people cannot see and they just think that it's subconscious, that it's magical. And this is really my idea of the editing, is that you have to use subtle tension. You don't change the color saturation so much that people would ask you, is this photoshopped? They just want to you just want to add this color saturation or brightness or whatever to a point that people cannot see it, but their subconscious can feel it. And that is what I call the co-creation. Because, for example, the inverted triangle that I just showed you, once you see that, oh, I see that, Tin Man, I raised my hand, I saw this inverted triangle. What does it mean? It means that you are partially invested in this picture because you just killed a few brain cells to create this inverted triangle in it. And once you invested something like a relationship, if you invested in it, it's very difficult to let go. And that's what we want for our viewer, is that we want them to invest a little bit. And I say, oh my God, Tin Man, you're really a psycho. Right? You know what I mean? Sorry about that. But so look at some painting of Rembrandt right here. And now you guys are already an expert. Why? Because when you look at the luminosity, the brightness of his hand and the face, that the brightness is changed, and that's what Rembrandt was using to lead your eyes. So my epiphany is that these master painters understood the psychology of the audience. They understood that the human visual cortex in our brain sometimes would create illusion from what we actually saw, and they harness it and use it as a secret step-by-step formula to lead the eyes of the audience and trigger the emotion layer by layer to the maximum. So you should not reinvent the wheel. What you should do is to learn from those masters. But how does it relate to photo editing? Haha, so now you ask me a good question, right? And what do we do now that we know that our visual cortex is messed up, right? So if you look at this photo again, what you didn't realize is I actually reduced the brightness just this tiny bit. If you look at this photo, you wouldn't see it. But if you look carefully, I reduce the brightness of the part on the above and the lower left and the upper left darker than the middle part. And people's subconscious will just drive them to look at the two heads of the polar bears without even knowing it. And so that's something that you can adjust. And some people call it the vignetting, but most of the people would just vignette every photo. For example, in portrait photography, they do it all the time. They didn't understand why. But you don't want to vignette everywhere the same amount or something. You actually have to trigger it in a very adaptive way so that it looks very natural. Like for example, in this photo, you look at this birds in flight, right? Some people will say that birds in flight is very difficult to capture the emotion of it. But now, I hope that your eyes is being driven to the eyes of the owl. And one of the reasons why is that if you look at the pixels right here and here, there's this subtle difference. And I don't want you to darken the photo just for the sake of it. What I wanted you to do is, so for example, the original photo of it, the surrounding is already a little bit dark. But what I wanted you to do is you just darken it to an amount that is very subtle, but enough to drive the eyes, to make the eyes move. So the key is to find a fine line between conscious and subconscious. Once viewers can see it, it's no good, right? But then they need to be able to feel, right? If it's too little, then they can't feel it, right? So it's really a pretty crazy concept. I hope you can sink in and think about it a little bit. And it is pretty much impossible for the brain to ignore drama, no matter how small it is. Once there is some tension in your photo, they just have to see it. But it can't be too serious, obvious, because people hate to listen to your order, right? You can't tell people, hey, look at the eye of this owl. I want you to look at it, right? So you have to use a very subtle way to create this kind of tension. Then you ask me, so Da Vinci and Rembrandt always use this one tension, right? Just darken the skin to drive the eyes. No, if you think this is what the master is doing, then you are totally wrong. Because if the tension is so subtle, it's not going to be enough. If just a little bit of brightness thing, you just feel it and say, oh, okay, I feel it, but I still didn't know what to do. So what did Da Vinci did? So there's a book written by the same author of Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, and actually one of my good friends, Tom, told me about this book, and I read it, and he recorded all the manuscript that he's written and they explained it and stuff like that. 600 pages, right? If you want to learn about photography, this is highly recommended. Let's take a look at Van Gogh, the master of colors, right? What he did here is that he used color tension to drive the eyes. So everything is complementary colors in his photo, and everything is trying to drive you to see something interesting there. And people may not know, people will think that, oh, he's just using very interesting colors and stuff. Everything has an intention there, very clear objective here. So let's look back at Da Vinci's painting. Right here, first of all, you see the brightness, right? Everybody are with me now. So now you're an expert on the brightness thing, right? Second thing, he used these curves and waters to drive the eyes. So everything coming from the colder color to the warmer color there. So that's another subtle difference. And the third thing is the textures, right? There's the shape of the hands, and then it was leading the head, the eyes, and also the green color complement with the golden yellow, and also implemented. And then also the textures right here, right? So the different textures also drive the eyes and following the lines. And, there's also some other stuff that I don't want to go into details here. But basically, if you look into, so this is actually the most important slide of the whole talk, is that Da Vinci used more than 10 subtle tensions stacked up. And you can see it. There are a lot of people, when they first saw the Mona Lisa, they think it's just a regular portrait. But I don't know why it just have that magic on it, right? So it's all because of the subtle tension that Mr. Da Vinci used masterfully, so that you cannot see it. You can't even see his thing unless you analyze it in details. And since I'm obsessed with all this crazy crap, so I just spend a lot of time to look into it. So he has the dark to bright tension. This is what I call the tension, right? Cold to warm tension, sharpness tension. So he doesn't sharpen the whole image, right? Which is wrong. If you want to sharpen the whole animal, like for example, if you get a tiger, you don't want to sharpen the whole tiger. You want to have a gradual change of sharpness to lead the eyes from the less sharp part to the sharpest part, which is the eye, right? So this is something you have to think about carefully, right? Everybody are teaching you about how to create this outline of the animals and then create like down to the pixel level and create a new layer and then sharpen the whole damn thing. And it's not going to work, right? Because when people look at the sharp thing, they look at the whole image of the tiger, right? They say, I don't know what to look at. Next photo, or I'm going to go watch Games of Thrones, right? Another replay is better than I have to think about what you want me to look at, right? So you have to teach people where to look at it. You are still with me on that? My question is, so when applying to wildlife photo editing, what if sharpening is not to make the photo sharper? It is to create a subtle tension from the blurry part to the sharp part, right? Look at this photo, right? And then instantly you look at the eyes, right? And because the eyes is the sharpest part of the image right here. And interesting, people all talk about color, right? Every time you post a photo, people say, this is the magenta cast. You have to adjust it, right? And then this is an orange cast. You have to remove it and stuff like that. And then you change the whole color balance, and then you submit the photo again to those forums. And then they ask you, and then say, no, I put in this color spider on my monitor, and the color is wrong for you, right? Stuff like that. And people will argue all about that. But all of this, I think, is a waste of time, because color temperature is not really reduce the color cast. It is also to drive your eyes based on the color temperature difference, because Mr. Van Gogh knew that our eyes are always moving along the boundary between the warm and cold color and the complementary colors. For example, this one, right? You feel the warmth of the fox a little bit more. I exaggerated this a little bit so that you can see the result. But if you reduce the subtleness of this, then you can't even see it, right? And then your eyes is always going from the cold part to the warm part. So basically, if I want to summarize it, God, how come you guys are always still there? This time is also almost up. I'm going to spend another 15 minutes if you are still with me. If you feel that this is something you have not thought about in photo editing and you want to stay, then I would give you more of what my finding. And I think you really have a big change in your photography, because you're not going to see it the same way. So anyways, so to summarize what I just talked about, right? So we are going to reverse the process. Instead of following the same routine and make it super boring, okay, this is the photo, change the color, change the sharpening, remove the noise, we create this layer, and then like down to the pixel level so that the hair and this feather is not touching each other on the background, right? All these things, I want to puke when I think about it, right? No, it's wrong. you start with the feeling that you want to convey in this photo, right? What kind of comment, what kind of feedback, right? Is that, wow, I didn't know that this bear, mother and cub share this kind of love, right? Or, oh, these guys are so playful. I see his eyes rolling, right? So you want people to look at that, and that's your starting point. You have to be very clear. And then when you apply color balance, when you apply sharpness, and everything has this one objective, which is to drive to the hook of your photo, right? And so I studied the master painters and break it down for you, just what I talk about by Mr. Da Vinci. Of course, there are a lot of details I didn't talk about, and I recommend you to look at it. Read his book, 600 books. He talks about sfumato, right? How he used blurring to create something that looks like what our human eyes are looking at. And then he used the peripheral vision and the major vision to mess up our mind, to see that sometimes, so that we see the smiling, sometimes we don't see. And he understands exactly where our eyeballs are moving around and stuff like that. It's fascinating. But then I have already summarized all the importance, the essence of it into my editing workflow. So when I post a photo, before I even post a photo, I already knew the response of the viewers and how their eyes will move. Right? You're like the magician now. So it's a lot of fun. But when you're editing the photo, you might be smiling like crazy, right? Because you know this sort of thing is gonna do. So this photo, if you look at it, I hope that it drives your eyes to the eyes on that. And this is the original photo. And then you say, Tim, you seems to add some color or something into it. It actually is not, because when I look into different channels of the color, all the colors were there in the raw file. You just accentuate it. And of course, I added it in a little bit extra so that you see the effect of the photo, how you just instantly grab your attention on that. And for example, this one is the before photo, right? The noise is distracting, and then it's still decent. But when you look into this photo, it's all these subtle tensions that is all stacking. And same as this one. If you look again in this photo, you would still, I hope, like for example, you look at this photo and you might wonder why your eyes is immediately drawn to the eye of the tiger. Eye of the tiger, yeah, I love the song. But later you realize that I have already applied Mr. Da Vinci's methods and also refined it to a big extent to get that, right? So your eyes would instantly be drawn to the touching of the cub to the mother right there. And so finally we get to the final part, and I have 10 more minutes, right? So you don't really need to be an expert in Photoshop. In fact, you don't have to have any technical background to master photo editing. I myself is not good, I can tell you that. I'm clueless in most of the functions in Photoshop, but I only need 4 minutes to edit a photo from beginning to the end. So let me tell you, all know about the 80-20 rule, right? So what I find out is that most of the steps being taught by the pros don't really help leading the eyes. They might improve the photo a little bit in terms of the sharpness everywhere and the cleanliness of the thing. But if the photo doesn't lead the eyes to the viewers, then I see that as really pointless to do, because right now everything is, you have to think like Mr. Da Vinci. I refine my techniques to the bare minimum. I only do the most important thing so that it's all down to a very short time that I can do it. So really in Photoshop, all you need to learn is really just learn one thing. And that's all you need, right? Is to understand the concept of one extra layer and how to use the brush to brush the effect back to the photo. And all it is about is just that when you change something, you don't want to change you don't want it to be destructive, so meaning that you can return back to the original. So you create a new layer and then you apply something, maybe you brighten it, and then you just brush all these regions that you want the part to be brightened back to the lower region, and then you just merge that two regions so that it's always this back and forth small motion, also abides by our subtle tension mentality here. And so this is really like a Command J to create a new layer, and then you use the brush to brush it away, and then you change some of the percentage, and then you change the opacity a little bit, and then you merge it down, and that's all you need really. And I remember I had 2 students in my editing class before. They had no experience. In fact, they couldn't even install Photoshop, and I had to give them some advice onto that. And later, when they understand the essence of my workflow, one of them just won an international award, photo award. And the other one just got a publication on that. And then they sent me some thank you note, and I was really happy. But what I'm more happier about is that it seems to me that what people were teaching us, what people wanted us to invest in hours and hours of editing classes and techniques and spending so much time to do it, it seems to be not really useful. When you think about Games of Thrones, it's not really useful. So anyways, let's recap. So we talk about why being the best in image sharpening, noise removal, and adjustment is the worst way to photo editing. And then the one thing that professional photographers never told you about, but is most critical mistake, which is really about this subtle tension. You don't want to apply the sharpening to everything. You don't want to change the color for everything. And you don't want to even change the color for some local regions. But you want to have a very clear objective of what you want the eyes to move, and then use very subtle difference to move it. And all of this require a specific formula, which is a step-by-step. You can change the step, right? You can switch some of the steps because it got messed up, and you really have to test it out yourself. Like later, when you go home, you maybe if you review the video, you can learn something and then you apply to your photo and see if it makes a difference. And then the test is that you show to people and people say that this is Photoshop, then you fail. Then if they don't see anything, then you fail too. But then when they say that, oh my God, your photo is enchanting, it has magic to drive my eyes, then you are succeeding, and then you can try another ingredient into it and then see if you work. So really, you don't need to be expert. All you need to do is just to understand this layer thing, and then you can just apply different layers and change the stuff on that. And these days, I only need 4 minutes from a photo to edit a photo from beginning to the end. So the time to do this is now. You really have to change your photo editing approach from now on, because you just can't spend so much time onto a photo that doesn't do you any good on that. And don't forget, as I mentioned, there are 2.3 billion Facebook feeds, and 1 second attention span to browse your photo, and 25,000 entries into a photo contest, right? If you still use the same technique instead of trying to retrieve all the potential from that 12-bit of your raw file, then you fail. Now you really have a choice. You can do one of the two things, right? One of the things is that you go back to your photos, right? And then you can do this on your own, and hopefully you can do it right, which is to conquer every roadblock. You find out every ingredient and then figure out every hiccups, which I took 12 years to do it. Or you can have me by your side and make sure that you are doing it right. Blast through those roadblocks and transform your photos faster than you ever could on your own. And you can let me help you. So how I can help is that I created this thing called the dynamic tension stacking. And this is a video course, and you can take it on your own pace. And actually you can, if you are willing, you can spend 1 day and you can finish the whole thing. And I think you can do it actually, but I want to spread it out into 4 weeks. So what I'm offering is that this class teaches you step by step the exact same workflow I use every day for all my photo posting and photo contest submission. If you really want the best chance of transforming your photo, this is it. So the section 1 is find a new opportunity in your photo that you don't even know existed. Section 2 is all the Photoshop techniques you ever need, and it's ultra simple. Number 3, hot and cold, bright and dark, and 2 critical tensions used by master painters and how you can do it effortlessly. Section 4, which is the most critical tension, F and dark F. I love this name, and a lot of the people find a lot of enjoyment learning this tension, which is something that you will never have learned in landscapes or any other photo masterclass. And then how you can apply global and local tension to lead the eyes of the viewers like magic. And section 6 is advanced techniques on sharpening. So even though I said that sharpening is not the end all, but you also have to master it so that you know where to apply this sharpening to. So I will tell you what you were doing wrong and how it can cost you time and bad results. And then noise removal is my specialty, really, right? I study in the grad school on that. So I'm going to teach you some simple techniques and powerful techniques to do that. And if you want to submit to photo contests, knowing how to effectively use noise removal is actually one of the critical tasks you should do in order to win, doing big prints. And I'll tell you one bonus section, which is a secret on image background that will make or break your image. And finally, I'm going to tell you how to stack them together in the right order to create the ultimate emotion trigger with the optimal parameters for each tension. And I understand that some of you may not want it because this is not really for everyone, because I only want those who have an open mind and are determined to succeed to take this, because it's very different from most of the editing class you have learned, because it's all psychology based, right? And this is everything I teach in this class are accepted by photo contests, by the most prestigious photo contests. And if you don't have a clue on photo editing, this class will change your life. And even if you already have some success, this class can save you hours and hours of work and transform your photos. So it's really for beginners and experts alike. And why am I sharing this secret that I have, right? Because I have these super powerful techniques that I know it works. It's almost unfair when you notice some secret of how human psychology works, because you can really harness that to have a lot of impact. And so I only want you to do good. But what I want to do is that I want to see if I have really cracked the code of these masters. I want more people to try it and see their impact. I have won some awards, and I have helped some of my friends and students with just very basic talk about teach them how to do it, and I'm already seeing results. And one thing that got me super frustrated is whenever on internet, in Instagram, Facebook, when I see some photographers who had great opportunity to take a mind-blowing photo, and they didn't know how to use the proper photo editing techniques to bring out the essence, and people miss it. Like, I see great photo opportunities, great techniques in the field, and it should have moved people's lives for thousands of people, but they only get 5 likes, and then they were forgotten in the history of internet. And this is very sad in our life. And I want those people to have that kind of capability. And our wildlife really needs your help. And this sounds all grand and all, but I believe that if a photo can tell a story, it can really save them.